that one.
Religious thought. Information does kill religion. The more you know, the harder it is to believe in old historical fictions and silly myths and ugly rules of ancient date that just don't apply anymore and only gets in the way of normal human empathy. So here's the book, The Arrogance of Religious Thought. Information does kill religion. It's available on Amazon in paperback, ebook, and audiobook that I recorded. And it's as relevant as ever. It really is. Okay? And yeah, that's a shameless plug for the book. You got it. I wish I could say, like Hitch, to whom this book is dedicated, that it's available in fine bookstores everywhere, as Christopher Hitchens used to say. Well, it isn't. I had to self-publish it, and I got it on Amazon and recorded my own audiobook, and I got an ebook format. But I want to get it into fine bookstores everywhere. I'm trying. Part of the impetus of this YouTube channel is to get enough following that I can convince a book agent to pick me up and I can get published for real. So we'll see. I've sold about 500 books, one at a time, from public speaking, mostly pre-COVID, and now more than ever, I think its message is relevant, so that's why we're talking about it today. The subtitle is just as relevant. Information does kill religion. Absolutely. Okay. Here in the U.S., we've seen the religious culture wars come out of the closet, and it's daily out in the open now. The Christian nationalists are blatantly wanting to shove their ideas about abortion down our throat, critical race theory, you name it. And everybody who's doing this is not an atheist. They're not non-believers. They're not humanists. They're not free thinkers. They're not secular humanists, right? They're not free thought people. They've all got a Christian religious base, and most of them pretty hardcore. And the modern Republican Party has pretty much been taken over by evangelical Christianity. Take a look at this meme from Barry Goldwater from the 60s. Pretty prescient, of what was going to happen if the religious took over the party. As an example, we now have 6 out of 9 Supreme Court judges are Catholics. Okay? That's 67% of the Supreme Court is Catholic, but only 22% of the country is Catholic. We're about 45% Protestant, and now we're up to 21% none, no religious affiliation. And there's nobody like that. There's no secularists on the Supreme Court. There ought to be 2 of them. Okay? We got 6 Catholics, 1 Episcopalian, a Jew, and a Protestant. Okay? It's about representative Jews. Jews are about 2%, so that's okay. We're gonna, we should have 2 or 3 non-religious secular people. That's what we're heading for down the road. The nuns, no religious affiliation, secular people. Generation Z is up to almost 50%. They're about 45%, no religious affiliation in recent polls. Yet our Supreme Court is highly, obnoxiously religious, and we're paying for it, right? So anyways, back to the book, Arrogance of Religious Thought. I'm just going to walk through it briefly. The intro is all about how I got into the culture wars, that I felt like I couldn't just respond to religious attacks like creationism and stuff. I need to go after religious thought. The base of all of it is not any one particular religion. It's religious thinking, that somehow your God is the real one, or your scripture was actually revealed to your prophets by some real God and everybody else's is just phony and silly, and of all the thousands of religions on the earth, only yours is the true one. Doesn't get much more arrogant than that. And anybody who belongs to a religion is taught that. Just get on TikTok or YouTube, Facebook, anywhere, and listen to religious people talk about how their stuff is the real stuff. And it's just arrogant as hell. Okay. Chapter 1, I talk about divisiveness. And one of the stories in there is a buddy of mine when I was at college, when I was doing my doctorate about 15 years ago. One of the guys in our secular group had done a tour or 2 or something like that in Iraq, and he saw the horrific religious violence between the sects of Islam. what Muslims would do to each other if they don't belong to the same sect. Just horrific. So he was dedicated to get all religions together. We need to talk to each other. We need to cooperate. So we had this group back home, and we invited every religious community we could find on campus to a meeting. We had a couple dozen kids in the room, just about every denomination represented. We had Muslims, we had Protestants, Catholics, non-religious people, Baptists, all over the board. And I think we had a couple Hindus, we had some Wiccan people, everybody. And as we're going around the room introducing ourselves, the Catholic kid says, well, I'm Catholic and I do this, and I'm a Christian and I do this and this. He gets to the next kid, and the evangelical Christian sitting next to him looks at him in front of all of us and says, you're not a real Christian. And we were just floored. Here we are trying to get a group together for religious harmony. And I'm a fucking atheist, and I wouldn't be that arrogant to another human being I don't even know in front of a room full of strangers. And he's evangelical Christian, and he was very upfront. Looks at the Catholic, you're not a real Christian. Yeah, there's no clue of church history that the Catholics have been around about 1,000 years more than any of the Protestant sects, but that doesn't mean you're not a real Christian. Just unbelievable, right? A great example of religious arrogance that destroys normal human behavior, normal human empathy. Chapter 2, I talk about misogyny, homophobia, like on the bumper sticker, right? And I'll give you a bunch of examples in there. One is, I talk about Mother Teresa, okay? The misogyny she puts up with. She is the quintessential Catholic, right? Revered, huge fundraiser, just the saint of our times. They tried to make her a saint, but really didn't work. But she can't be Pope, Cardinal, Bishop. She can't even be a local parish priest and deliver the sacraments. Why not? She's got the wrong genitals. She's a female. Okay? And what's really screwed up about that is, for all we know of her very pious life, she probably never even used them. Get real. The absurdity knows no bounds. The misogyny of the Catholic Church that, well, no, women can't this, and this, and this. And you see it in Buddhism, you see it in Islam, you see it in Hinduism, you see it in all the religions. Patriarchy and misogyny is still very much a part of those belief systems, and they suck. They're awful. Time to get rid of them. We could talk all day about the clobber passages in the Bible, okay, that rip on homosexuality and have, persecuted gays and lesbians for millennia now, right? I've got some great things in there. Homosexuality is found in dozens of species, okay? And it's the result of variation in genetic and hormonal influences, okay? As is variation in gender, on the developing fetal brain in the womb. And it always doesn't fully change from the default value of female to male. And you get all sorts of partial effects. They're all fully normal. They're normal people. But you don't get just typical male and typical female. I do a whole lecture on it in my intro to psych class. Completely against all the crap that's in all the religions. They're all homophobic to some extent and just primitive thinking. It's time to get rid of them. Okay. Chapter 3, I get into eternal damnation. And I have a whole episode on that. I have an episode on a hell of an idea, and some of that, a little bit of that's drawn from the book. There's no hell realm ever been found. It's a complete fantasy. You can ignore anybody's claims about that there's some hell you're going to burn in. It's garbage. Chapter 4 is on creationism. It's a great chapter, and it gets into the details of the absurdity of some of the creationist ideas. And one of the things I really get into is, just to believe in creation, how much science you have to throw out the window, okay? So I talk about how, like, Yellowstone, Meteor Crater, the Badlands, Devil Tower, according to creationists, can only be more than a few thousand years old, when they were all millions of years, hundreds, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, million years in the making. And the chapter really goes into some interesting detail. It really hits you in the face of how much just everyday science you have to throw out to believe in some nonsense idea about creationism drawn from the Bible. Chapter 5 is about evangelizing and moralizing. And one of the things that comes up so often is that us atheist types, us non-believers, are suddenly going to convert on our deathbed. Okay? Right? And one of them is that, Muslims think you need to convert to Islam on your deathbed. You need to admit that you were born a Muslim. You need to take an Arabic name in recognition of that fact. And because everybody is born Muslim and there is but one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, that's it. Everything else is false. Okay? And, 1.5 billion Muslims out there, right? So when I hear somebody say that, Christians are really good for that one too. Oh, you'll come back to Christianity, or you'll convert on your deathbed, or Darwin did, or Hitchens did, or something. It's all nonsense, okay? Here's the thing. All you Christians out there, right? How many of you worry about that maybe you chose the wrong religion, and then on your deathbed you'll realize it and you'll convert to Islam, right? How many Christians really worry or think about that? Probably close to none. Well, that's how us atheists thinks about Christianity too, or Islam. We're not going to convert to Christianity on our deathbed either, okay? Wake up, catch on to it, right? Chapter 6 gets into Christian apologists a little bit, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit. When I was teaching in Kentucky, I headed up 2 secular groups at the campus I was at, and I got to know a real nice young guy, a respected Christian apologist on campus. He was very much a spiritual leader. He was really curious to kind of see what made me tick. We had lunch a couple times. Really good guy, very sincere. We had some good talks, and this was just a few years after Dawkins, Hitchens, Harris were all published. And it was very popular, and the authors were on TV. Atheism was finally being discussed openly everywhere. This would be 2008, 2009, somewhere in that time frame. And I asked him if he would recommend that his students read any of those new atheist books, along with the Bible and the Christian apologetic stuff that he has them read. Get to know both sides and weigh the arguments and such. And he paused for a minute and gave a very thoughtful no for an answer. He would not recommend them read Dawkins or Hitchens or Harris. And I wondered if I thought maybe he thought his kids couldn't handle it or this and that. And then I thought about it that no, he doesn't. He knows they're not stupid, and that it's just the opposite. He knows they're too smart, and they could read those things and it could destroy their faith. Right? They're not stupid. And they got to be kept in that Christian cocoon to keep them in the fold. So no, they better not read God is Not Great or, excuse me, The God Delusion or The End of Faith or any of the books that had come out then. And you kind of think about it. He was upfront that he would deny his spiritual students access to any secular writings. He wouldn't recommend that they would write them. And he probably knew. They weren't stupid. They're like any other average person. They could read that and go, hey, wait a minute. Right? Chapter 7 is all about child indoctrination, and I have a whole episode here on the YouTube channel on that, episode 8. Some of that is drawn from the book, so you could read that. And I'll repeat this quote. I still haven't found who actually did it. Religions would collapse under the weight of their own absurdity without child indoctrination. Okay. What I found with my own kids and plenty of others of their friends in Millennial and Gen Z that are not raised in a religion, they're not missing anything. They're not missing anything on Sunday morning. Okay? Only old people do that. Only old people do Unitarian churches and the Sunday sermon things where they light candles and they do chants, but they leave God, Jesus. It's kind of phony going through the motions. Kids that are raised secular, they don't go seeking for, oh God, I got to join a religion, I'm missing something. They're not missing anything. They've got normal human empathy. They love their family, they love their kids, they work hard, they want to be good people, they want to be good citizens, they follow the golden rule, they try and be honest, on and on and on. You don't need this religious garbage to make you straight. Like I said, Generation Z is now almost 50% non-religious. in the U.S., and I have a whole episode on that, episode 9, Way to Go Gen Z, so you can look at that. I personally think child indoctrination in a religion is child abuse, okay? Especially youth ministry. That's a sleazy practice. They prey on, pun intended, emotionally vulnerable and cognitively immature adolescents. Kids who look up to adults, right? And they're forming their identity, and then they give them this phony, oh, this book is true, this is the real God, this is the real way to worship, here's the truth about the afterlife and souls, and you're going to burn in hell if you don't do this and that. Whatever religion is conning them into this garbage, it's phony, and it's the sleaziest practice there is out there. Chapter 8 is all about denial of knowledge, and one of the examples I have in that chapter is the GARP about carbon-14 dating, that creationists have to say, well, carbon-14 can't possibly work because the Earth is only 6,000 years old, so you can't get dates on 10 and 40 and 50,000 or any other radiometric dating that we know things are 1 million years old or the Earth is 4.5 million years old, etc., right? So carbon-14 is used all over the world daily. There's over 130 carbon-14 labs used by archaeologists, classical scholars, historians, anthropologists for 70 years or more now, okay? Carbon-14 works. The creationists are full of shit, okay? Wiki it for yourself. Read all about it, okay? And the other thing is, if carbon-14 didn't work, if that radioisotope chemistry was wrong, your smoke detector wouldn't work either, because there's a little bit of radioactive material in your smoke detector that detects tiny molecules of smoke going by before it even gets smoky in your room, right? You got to go over and wave the dish towel. Well, when you're broiling something, you can't even see any smoke, and the smoke detector in the living room goes off, right? Well, that runs by a radioactive isotope, okay? So people like Kirk Cameron and Todd Friel that claim C14 doesn't work, they're complete and outright lie. Sorry, okay? Chapter 9 is called Information Kills Religion. And I have examples of how learning about things makes religious claims go poof. And I talk about the Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso is his real name. And he seems to be a really nice guy. He's a one-man publishing house, right? And he has become enlightened, but not in the traditional Buddhist sense. Well, maybe he has, but who would know, right? As a well-traveled man, he has come to some really solid conclusions. And in one of his books, I think it's Religion Now or something like that, he talks about, it's in the references, there is no power of prayer. He's caught on to that it's useless beyond some psychological benefit to the person praying, right? He knows better. People die with and without prayer. Prayer doesn't work. Doesn't matter which God or which religion you're doing it in. It doesn't work. The second thing he's caught on to in one of his books, he said, people don't need a religion to be good. And that makes sense. Like I said, he's a very world-traveled guy. He's met people from all religions and plenty of people from no religion. So he's caught on that, hey, there's a whole lot of good people that don't believe what everybody else believes, and there's a whole lot of good people that don't believe any of it, right? You don't need religion to be a good person. Information kills religion, right? Gather enough information, religious claims fall apart pretty quickly, okay? Now, nice guy that he is, and he is generally thought to be, he still buys into a whole host of just batshit crazy ideas with no evidence for them. He believes in an eternal soul that gets reincarnated over and over, and not only that, he is the 14th reincarnation of the Lama, and he can influence where he will be reincarnated as number 15. And he also believes in dough ball divination. Don't believe me, look it up on his website yourself, that you can put some dough balls in a little dish and put different names on it, and when you swirl the dish, one of the dough balls falls out, that'll have the name of the real McCoy. The real Lama, okay? That batshit crazy. You can't make this shit up, okay? Good guy that he is, completely buffaloed by some silly 2,000-year-old ideas. Chapter 10 is all about the new Enlightenment, and my companion website dispatches from the new Enlightenment, right? I've been writing since, 2013, almost a decade, and since 2004 or so, the new Enlightenment took off with Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Dan Barker, and a dozen other authors of the New Enlightenment took off, picking up on where the first Enlightenment left off of the 17th and 18th centuries, the Age of Reason, and then the Age of Industrial Revolution and Science, that questioned religious claims and religious authorities, and educated the public on what the so-called scriptures really are, which is old historical fictions and silly myths. That religions are just 2,000-year-old ways of explaining the world from a very primitive and often barbaric time, 1000 BC, 0 AD, 1000 AD. It's time to see them for what they are. I have an acronym I use called TAWLNOT, TAWLNOT, okay? And it just means there's a whole lot of norms out there, okay? And that's a little reminder to me that when I was first speaking about this kind of stuff and writing about this kind of stuff in an editorial in a college newspaper, I had a guy come up to me in a bar and said, gee, I took your class a couple years ago, didn't think much about it, but I read your editorial and somebody needs to say all the stuff you're saying, questioning, examining, critiquing religion, and it's so refreshing to hear the other side from what we've been brainwashed on from kids. And this guy came out of nowhere and did this for me, and his name happened to be Norm. And so I keep that in mind. There's a whole lot of norms out there, okay? Like I said, since here in 2023, we're really seeing the culture wars, free thought and tolerance and science versus mostly Christian, at least in the U.S., conservative restrictions, trying to openly impose their old wrong ideas on everybody, whether it's, abortion, LGBTQ stuff, trans stuff, it's nuts, okay? But we're winning, okay? The secular nuns keep going up each generation. Churches are closing. Catholicism and evangelical Christianity are both down every year, okay? The evangelicals couldn't get Trump a second term, and the blue wave in the next couple of interim elections were a pushback to these sanctimonious politicians and leaders. So the end of the book ends with why I write, speak, and do this. And part of it is that story about Norm. There's a whole lot of norms out there. There's a lot of people that have an inkling that religion is bullshit. And when they hear it, they're allowed to go, yeah, that's right. That's what I've been thinking all along. And that's what I do it for. Information does kill religion. And the sooner we can drop all these 2,000-year-old useless ideas, we can move forward faster. Religion's just get in the way of tolerance and normal human empathy, and often progress. Most of the science denial you see out there comes from the highly religious. All the COVID misinformation, the COVID denial, the silly QAnon stuff, just conspiracy theories, all comes out of the religious. Okay. Information transfer is really what separates us from the other animals. It's a quest for me. It's why I teach. It's why I write. Like I said, religion only blocks normal human empathy, and knowledge is all we have. So, that's the book. Like I said, it's on Amazon in paperback, ebook, and audiobook form. If you can support my work in any way, jump on Patreon. It's in the description down below, or you can just get on Patreon and look for Unbelieving Scum. One of the levels of couple of the levels of support for my work, you get a free signed copy of Arrogance and Religious Thought. You get some other goodies too. If you like what you see on this channel, please hit the subscribe button. I'm trying to build this thing up. I got a dozen or so episodes on here now. We're going to crank one out a couple times every month, maybe weekly. And, this is really important to me, and I hope it's informative to you. And have a great one as always. And we'll see you next time.